I've been thinking. A lot of people sort of struggle with the concept of home ownership as an investment, specifically the opportunity cost of home ownership and what you could be investing with that same money otherwise. And when I say opportunity cost, what I'm really talking about is of not doing something. For example, if you choose to not invest in Bitcoin in 2014, when it was a little more than $200, you saved $200 at the time, but it cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars according to the current price in early 2024. Homeownership is a similar concept. I once had a friend ask me, Derek, you seem to make good money. Why don't you own a nice house or a nice car? And that's a good question. However, I quickly responded to that individual, you fool! I examined the opportunity cost of homeownership and expensive car ownership, and I took a look at my financial goals. And I decided that if I'm going to hit them, I need to make sure that my funds are allocated and prioritized in the right place. My friend then proceeded to stop being friends with me because I called them a name, a little bit of a snowflake. I'm kidding, of course. But he then remarked to me, you have to live somewhere, right? Shouldn't you own where you live? I responded to them, you damn fool. In most circumstances, it makes more sense to own where you live. But if you have a certain set of financial goals, maybe it's better to rent sometimes. And if you do own property of some kind, to rent that out to people need to have a space. This was a very contentious conversation, as you might imagine. My cantankerous attitude didn't help at all. But eventually, we got to the important question of what are the better places to put your money if you have big financial goals? And my response to that question is what this video is about. So let's dive in. First things first. You need to understand what you can afford. There are any number of mortgage calculators out there that exist, and they give you a pretty good idea of the kind of home that you can afford. And the method that everyone tends to use is to take a third of your income. Anything higher than that, and you're likely going to be house poor. A circumstance where you have a nice house, but you need to take the bus and eat ramen noodles because you literally can't afford to live anywhere else. You literally can't afford to do anything else. You then take that number and you plug it into any of the number of calculators that you have out there, and now you know what you can afford. Quick illustration. If I open up a mortgage calculator and I put in how large a house I want, and I adjust it so that I pay about $8,000 a month, a decent amount for a house anywhere in the United States, I know I have an idea of how much I can afford, and I can then use that knowledge to shop around and find something pretty nice. If you look anywhere in the United States, including San Francisco, including Dallas, Miami, New York City, $8,000 a month, that would fit in well with anyone's current financial situation. The only problem is, if you have larger goals than simply having a very nice and very expensive house, well, you're sort of out of luck. If you take a look at those same mortgage calculators and you play around with the amortization schedules, you can plainly see that the interest that you pay, particularly on a 30-year mortgage, is rather insane. On that same house, on the house that you desire that costs you about $8,000 a month, you see that if you wanted to put down 20% to avoid PMI, primary mortgage insurance, I believe that's the acronym anyway, you need to put down $300,000 and pay over the course of 30 years. In addition to that, you would need to pay over 30 years $1.2 million in principal, plus another $900,000 in interest. $900,000. Take this as an example to understand what the opportunity cost really is. In total, you put down about $2 million over the course of those 30 years. And admittedly, it would have been a really nice house. During that time, the price of the house could double, maybe, meaning it would be worth $3 million. So the true absolute profit that you could have made out of that transaction would be $607,000. Now, here's where a lot of people get sort of mixed up. And let me explain a little bit more. It's pretty reckless to estimate that the price of any property would more than double over 30 years. And there are plenty of cases of that happening. But it certainly is speculative. And anyone that was alive in the 2008-2009 mortgage kerfluffle can tell you home prices don't always go up. They typically do, but not always. And if you don't have the guts to hold on when they go down, well, you can lose a lot of money. The thing is, the more likely case is that it doesn't quite double, and you don't quite make the money that you think you're going to make on that property. In my current locale, the Dallas, Texas area, particularly, it's growing spectacularly. And inflation is probably going to be rough for the next couple of years, and even if that gets under control, it will be likely at a slightly greater than 2% on average. So there's a solid chance that the value of any house that you purchase in like the Dallas, Texas area will more than double. Then again, the price could fall. There are a bunch of prognosticators saying that the housing market, mostly commercial real estate, but some are saying that residential real estate could fall relatively soon, particularly with these high interest rates that seem to be persistent thanks to persistent inflation. You just don't know. All you know is that you paid almost $1 million of interest and $1.5 million of principal. The question is, you paid all that money, you got a nice house. Maybe it didn't double, maybe it did double. But what could you have purchased with that same amount of money? $2,500,000 could have purchased you any number of things. Now let's look at what happens when you stuff it in your mattress. Using any number of calculators out there, you can calculate what you would have gotten if you had stuffed that same money under your mattress, assuming no inflation or deflation. If you took your down payment for that house that you can't afford, you know, about $300,000, and you took those same monthly payments, just under $8,500 a month, 8,462 to be precise, and you simply buried it in your backyard and put an X on top, you know, X marks the spot, the amount of money you would have after that, after 30 years, would be $3,346,320. Simply by saving the money that you had with no interest being paid to you, you beat putting money into a house and a mortgage. But you don't have a house, so you don't really have an asset, and you really have sort of a depreciating asset that is dollars that deflate in the real world. I know in this example I said assume no inflation or deflation. That's not realistic in most circumstances. But it's an illustration, and I can tell you that other forms of putting your money in other places, well, generally speaking, your results would be much better. Now, what would happen if you put money into a quote-unquote high-yield savings account? Now, I know what you're thinking. Derek, high-yield savings accounts. Well, the rates are unreasonably high right now, thanks to everyone's favorite economic phenomenon, you know, inflation. You won't be able to maintain those rates over a 30-year period. Let me grant you that and assume that high-yield savings accounts average 2.5% yield over a 30-year period. The amount of money that you would accrue using that mechanism alone, that is taking your down payment and the same monthly payments that you would have paid to your mortgage issuer, well, the resulting money you would got out of that would be $5,164,000. As you can imagine, it's going to get brutal from here, folks. Imagine you put that same money into the stock market. Now, I know the complaints that will normally come out of this line of thinking are that the stock market is volatile, dude. I don't want to put my money in there since it's more or less like gambling in a casino. And in many cases, you're right. Most people don't know how to invest their money in the stock market. They pick single stocks when they don't know how. They then also mess around with stock picking. They then mess around with like technical analysis or even quantitative analysis and just don't know what they're doing, and they just lose a lot of money. Or they then pay a financial advisor and they take fees out of their accounts, and it just gets ugly quickly. Now, there are ways to invest in the stock market the smart way, and I talk about it on this channel, so make sure you're liked and subscribed. It's just the case that investing in the stock market, particularly if you buy individual company stocks, even if you do all the research and follow market gurus, pay for someone else to give you stock tips, pay to be part of a stock investing club, you're just not gonna be as successful as you could be. You're more than likely going to lose money, as a matter of fact. And most people are terrible at picking stocks, and very, very few, even of professional stock pickers, actually make money. Even fewer than that beat the S&P 500 index fund. And this is true whether you're doing fundamental analysis, i.e. picking one stock at a time based on the fundamentals of the companies that underlie the stock, but also using high-frequency technical analysis. Just being good at picking stocks is just not easy. And more than likely, you're the type of person that can't do it, and you're going to lose money. So using that example, you're absolutely right. You would make more money if you spent your money on a house. But if you were to invest in the stock market, let's say the smart way, and simply buy an index fund or an ETF. Keep in mind that index funds are more set it and forget it, so I prefer those, but ETFs tend to encourage a velocity of trading and kind of defeats the purpose of these sort of instruments, but I digress. What you would get back in return would be $15,892,000 and some change. Now, this is assuming you put in the same amount as your down payment for your house, and you kept investing in the index fund by paying into it monthly. The same way you're investing into your house by paying your mortgage monthly. In that scenario, you would more than 5x'd what your total payment was for the investment in your house over that same time period. You would have saved $3,300,046. Just the principal of the investment. And the total interest that you accrued would be $12,540,000 and some change. A 4x growth in your wealth. Let's talk about REITs. REITs are one of the asset classes that have been known to outperform the stock market. You know, the S&P 500, particularly during long-range investment windows. You know, the same amount of time you would be investing in a house. You know, buy a mortgage. If you run that same analysis and you take an annualized return of 10%, which is roughly how much REITs have been shown to perform in the past, keeping in mind that past performance is not an indicator of future performance, the amount of money you would have accrued would be about $25 million, 8x the total value of the house you would have put into a mortgage. And we're not even talking about taking on riskier propositions like funding a startup, buying a franchise, putting your money into crypto. To me, the results are clear. The opportunity cost of owning a house are stark. The same money that you invest in that house could definitely be put to better use elsewhere. Now, this is not me saying that you should never own a house. Owning a house is the best you can make of a bad situation. Like my friend was saying, you have to live somewhere. And the best situation is to own where you live. Well, actually, the best situation is where you house hack and you use that down payment that we talked about earlier to buy a duplex, triplex, quadplex, which still counts as a single family in the eyes of the law, and more importantly, your banker, by renting it out to someone else. That gives you the opportunity to own where you live and also make a little bit of cash as well. Take a look at the video on your screen right now for more tips just like that. I want you to like this video if you got any value out of it whatsoever. Leave an angry comment explaining to me why buying a house is so awesome. And subscribe to the channel, keeping in mind that a goal without a plan is a wish. And a goal with a plan and no action is a wish list. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Like I said, I'm out of here. Peace.